Hello and welcome to the first update for 2018 from Dean Park. I've been buying 2 or 3 little bits and pieces this month, as well as working on my signal and telecommunications and substation areas. I'll take you through what I've been up to. If you have any questions, get in touch. Cheers! The area that's been taking up most of my time this month has been the signal and telecommunications training facility. I've been working on 3 main areas with this: the road surface, the paving and the test track at the right hand side there. First of all, let's look at the tarmac. I showed you how to do this in a previous video and the link's at the top of the screen now, but I've added some road markings using the scale model scenery road marking templates, and what you do is you place them on where you want them and then you use a sponge, almost dry brushing, dabbing white paint on, and this gives the effect of realistic coverage, so it's not just like totally painted on and totally white. As you can probably see there, there's little, tarmacy bits coming through the paint, as is per the real life. Obviously worn down by cars, people walking on it, not laid very well in the first place, and just rain and atmospheric conditions. I've also fitted the drain covers. These are brass etched from Langley models. I painted them with some rail match sleeper grime, dusted some weathering powders on them, sealed that in place and placed them on the layout. Now, there was a small recess for the drains, and this has the effect now, they lay over the top of the recess, a bit more a 3D look, so there's actually a gap between the top of the drain and the surface of the tarmac below, so it's more realistic. The second area is the paving. This was card, shaped out, and then I glued with rocket medium viscosity adhesive this Slater's paving card on top of it. I then cut some curbstones using 2.5mm by 2.5mm square sectioned evergreen plastic, and I cut all the grooves for the individual curbstones myself, and as you can see by the amount going round there, it was quite a long and tedious job, but it's worth it. I then primed the whole lot with grey primer and then painted a weathered concrete finish on it, and that's Precision Paints. Then I've picked out 2 or 3 areas in slightly different shades, but then after that I went and put a black wash on, or a dark grey wash actually, a very thin enamel wash. I think it was Humbrol dark grey that I used. I watered it down, I coated the whole area in this wash, gave it half an hour just to kind of bind in to the creases between the slabs and also dry a little bit on the surface before taking a bit of kitchen towel dampened with enamel thinners and wiping off the surfaces of the slabs. I'll do a tutorial on this at some point in the near future, and that gives the effect of different areas and different tones. You could probably see there around about the drain cover, the area is a bit darker, maybe because it's got more traffic, or just water tends to run off in that direction towards the drain. And again at the right hand side there you've got a darker area. It also highlights the curbstones as well and gives them a weathered appearance. I then fixed this down. I weighted it down with lots of weights using PVA, because the wood surface for the ply and the card are perfect for just general adhesive just such as PVA, and it was weighed down to allow it to set, and it's turned out pretty well. Third area is the test track. I ballasted this and then I used my Rail Match rust colours to give the track a rusty appearance with very light weathering of the ballast, because it's not had any trains for grime and stuff going over it. It's just general grime and dirt coming from the sleepers, the creusot, etc., and the rust seeping down onto some of the ballast. So you notice the ballast is quite clean in between the sleepers and at the edges of the sleepers, with just the rails being rusted along with the chairs that the rails are connected to the sleepers with. I've not cleaned the top of the track, as you would do if you were running trains on it, obviously for passing of the voltage and the currents, but there's no trains running on this, so it's totally rusted and it gives it a more realistic appearance. You'll notice that I've fitted the AWS ramps, and I've got the point motor dummy there, and I've got these 2 areas here which will be for the relay boxes. I'll highlight one of the relay boxes in the following clip. And this area here is for the 2-aspect ground signal that I've got from CR Signals, and that'll be fitted and that'll be working, and I'll have a switch at some place, maybe down here on a wee mini control panel, just to switch it from red to green. I had looked into motorising this point, but there's track work underneath, and for clearance of trains I didn't bother, and at the end of the day it's not operational, so what's the point in having an operating turnout. This area here is a scale model scenery drain, and it's not obviously not got its cover on it yet. That'll be getting added in with all the other details such as cabling, wiring, speed signs, and all the other track paraphernalia. They tend to be very condensed. All the stuff tends to be condensed in a small area for training purposes, so it'll look quite busy there when it's all done. And obviously I've got my cable trunking there with the orange cables, ducting to take the cables through the sleepers without damaging them. So I'm sure you'll agree, quite a bit of work there. I've still got to put some ground cover in here. I'm thinking about red chips, you know, like the red chips you have in your driveway, for area around here for the workers to walk on. Obviously having ballast, it's too coarse for the workers to walk back and forward on, so something a bit finer. I might go for some N scale. I've got some N scale iron ore ballast that I've not used. I might just have a look at that and see what it looks like before deciding. I might use grey, but I don't know. Also fencing going in here with the gates, and a sign there, and you know, weeds and grass and stuff. And then at the perimeter of the whole facility will be the fencing. That's me put the buildings in place now. Obviously you can see the paving has been covered up quite a bit, but obviously there's walkways as well around the buildings, and there's access to all the doors. A lot of work going into this area so far, and I'm quite pleased with how it's turning out. It's taken longer than it's expected though. The kit I've been making up this month is the Scale Model Scenery Relay Box Equipment Cabinet Platforms, and the code for that is LX148-00. This is a 3-pack. There is a small, medium and large, and on display here are the medium and large platforms. They go together very easily with rocket card glue, and I've just, once they were dried, I primed them in grey primer and used a Humbrol 64 aerosol to give them the grey finish. I then toned them down with some weathering powders, again from Humbrol, and that enhances the tread pattern on the platform and the steps. It also gives it a grimy line side look as well, as would be the case in real life. The legs can be altered in height. As you can see, the medium one sits lower than the large one. You can count the number of steps there. There's 4 steps there and 3 steps there. This is by no means the highest it can go. I trimmed this down as well, so you can have a much higher platform if you wish. You could also have one side of the legs shorter than the other if you want to position it on an embankment side, which is where they are commonly seen. I'll be using the large one at the retaining wall section I'm working on just now. There will be relay boxes which have limited clearance for the worker to work on the relay boxes while the trains go past, so I'm going to put them on this platform just for a bit of added safety for the line side worker. They're an excellent kit, very easy to build, very easy to paint and weather, and very easy to modify as well. Good value for money, highly recommended from me anyway. I've also been making up some of the relay boxes from Wills. This particular one I've cut the door open before I assembled it to give it a appearance of being worked on. And once I'd glued the door in place, I just primed it in grey, and this is a satin 166 Humbrol colour, and I've just toned it down a little bit as well with a very light spraying of matte varnish. This particular one will go at the S&T training facility, and I've put an interior inside it so you can have some detail. The man's not just standing looking into an empty box. There's also a bit of health and safety signage on the back of the door there, just to remind the worker when he opens the door the precautions that he needs to take. Now, interiors are not something that's on the market, so I looked at some pictures from relay boxes from a variety of sources online, and I used a bit of artistic license and I mocked up this particular item. It's just a plastic card. I think it's 1 and 1.5 millimeter thick card, again primed and sprayed. This is Humbrol 64, and what I've done is I've gone online and I've looked at relay boxes, capacitors, control panels, and I've picked the one that I think looks most convincing, with your socket circuitry, a bit of wiring and some switches. I just printed it out using normal printer paper, and I use spray mount to position it on the actual plastic frame. These three kind of columns there, if you like, again I was using a bit of artistic license and looking at different pictures. This is very small, I wasn't going to start fidgeting about with real wires, and these can be ducting for the cables to go from the top down to the ground level, and then obviously into the cable trunking. I'm quite pleased with that actually. For all you see of it when the door is actually open, it's still worthwhile putting it in to get that realistic look, and it'll go well at the S&T training facility with a chap maybe looking down at, having a look inside, and his assessor will be standing by marking his progress. When I was buying my Class 47-7 from Kernow, I noticed that the limited edition compressors that were exclusive to them, and I bought a pack, and they weren't cheap, as you could probably see from the price tag. These will go at the building site or on a roadside diorama that I put in the future, maybe somebody digging up the road, etc. Or they could go on a flatbed wagon as well. There's some that were commonplace around about the 80s and 90s. I remember seeing them as hauled at the back of council trucks or at the side of the road while the compressor was used to power the pneumatic drills, etc. So these will be a nice little addition. They look a touch large, but I'm not an expert on how big they were in real life, so I'll reserve judgment till I get them out of the pack and place them on the layout and see what they look like. I've been adding to my fleet of BR yellow vehicles this month, and I've got 4 new additions to the fleet. I've got a Comer van here, which is probably best suited in the 1970s, but still would have been visible in the early part of the 80s, if not a little bit clapped out. When I do eventually get around to weathering my vehicles, this will get a pretty worn down and clapped out appearance. I've also got 2 Sherpa vans here, which would be used to ferry workers from the depot to and from the track, and other obviously journeys that are required. I've also got the British Rail yellow Land Rover Defender. And this particular one has the facility to go along the rails, and these actually move up and down, so it's got obviously the not in use position and the in use angle there, and the same at the back. The little wheels do turn. It'll be interesting to see if they actually move along the track, but that's a nice little addition to the range. And there's obviously ramps here as well in the pack to help it get onto the track. I'm assuming that's what they are. So this will go with my transit van, my standard British Rail Defender that I've got already, and the Bedford van that I've got. So I'm building a big range of the BR Yellow because I'm going to have a British Rail depot somewhere around this end of the layout, at the east end of the layout, near the S&T training facility. These would also look at home in the car park of the S&T training facility, obviously dropping off and picking up workers that have been doing a bit of training. Another area I've been working on in the last month is the concrete hard standing for the substation area. This has been laser cut by me from 2mm MDF. I've also etched grooves in the top of the MDF to simulate the different slabs of concrete. From there I primed it, I painted it with a Phoenix Precision Paint weathered concrete, which is the kind of grey colour. I then mixed that with some darker greys and I think it was a Humbrol 62 leather to give it the darkened weathered streaks and add a little brownness to it. I don't know if the light's picking it up particularly well there on the camera, but there is a kind of browny tinge to areas, and you've obviously got the darker greys running across where the gaps where the water would gather as obviously it drains into the gaps, and just generally weather it up. The substation will sit, it's been cut to the profile of the substation, the substation will sit there to allow an access path, and obviously I've got this area here which will be all the substation equipment, which I've shown you in a previous video, but I've just finished toning down with some weathering powders to take off the clean grey and give it a little bit of a rain weathered look. Just using dark earth and black Humbrol weathering powders with a very light misting of Humbrol varnish just to seal them all in place. Something with weathering powders that are not a lot of magazine tutorials and that will tell you, if you don't seal them in place they will come off on your fingers and stuff if you've obviously done a quite heavy weathering. Your best is to give a very light misting or varnish just to lock them in place, and that's what I've done with this. You'll notice the pipes or cables there coming from the wall of the substation, so it looks like it's obviously a part of the same structure. I've also got these cabinets from Shapeways, they're 3D printed, and again I've given them the dusting weather treatment using a broad brush with very light weathering powders, and you might be able to see just the kind of grime on the raised panels, especially around the square box in the middle there with the screw or rivet detail around the edges, and you can see the kind of dirty creases and that on the roof. Again, just from general grime, atmospheric dust, and washed down with the rain. They will go in amongst this substation gantry here, and that will be placed on the layout. From there a fence will be put around and scenic material to blend it in with the rest of the railway. Work continues on the retaining wall section in the cutting that I've highlighted in the previous update. This tunnel entrance, the single road tunnel entrance, is now finished, ready for painting. And you can see I've added the buttress detail, the arch brick detail and the keystone detail. I've also got a ridge of bricks there as well, which the capping stones will sit on. I've added the plinth to the bottom of the wall as well, which I think gives it a nice finishing touch. If you look on there, it looks quite cool. And I fitted the curved roof, which is just a piece of the brick sheet, and I glued it onto the ridges that I'd left onto the sides, and I just held it in place with a bit of evergreen plastic strip there, and I used some epoxy resin for that. I used epoxy resin because it's quite thick and it sets in about 5 minutes, the rapid stuff anyway, so it allowed me to hold it in place while I was gluing it. So that's finished. That'll go into the paint shop, also known as the shed, in due course, and be primed and then painted with a Humbrol 70 red brick. And if you want to know how I paint my brickwork, the link is at the top of the screen now. I covered that in a previous video. The rest of the retaining wall will come in the next weeks, and hopefully be put on the layout before spring. If you saw my Class 47 7 Kernow Limited Edition review earlier in the month, you'd have seen some signal cam shots of the Class 47 coming into the station, filmed from inside the Edinburgh Waverley style signal box. This was thanks to a Christmas present that I got, which is one of these little cameras. It's not a GoPro, but it's a similar kind of idea to that, and it's remote control, and it's 4K HD and Wi-Fi compatible. This allows me to get shots into smaller areas that I could never get this digital camera that I'm filming on just now. So the signal cam, you might get a platform cam, tunnel cam, and different little kind of areas to make the running session shots a bit more exciting. It is a bit wide to fit on a truck to make it into the tunnels, but I can still do some, you know, track cam views if I get myself a flatbed wagon. So there is the benefit of having the 4K, but it is a bit wide for fitting in the tunnels at the station entrance. I hope you've enjoyed that video. If you have, why not check out one of my earlier videos? Or if you'd like something from the Network South East region, click on Richard from Everard Junction. The links are on the screen.